and all of the things on our agenda are not joke. They're very, very real. So, yeah, let's get started. So, we are starting off talking about stormwater management. And we have a few folks here to speak to that. So we'll just go right down the list. So we have Ms. Doherty here with us, from the town of Williston. Welcome. And this is your first time with us here.
It is.
So I think we should do a round of introductions and then we'll let you take it away.
Great, thank you.
Good morning, I'm Senator Ricciardi from the Addison District.
Terry Williams from Rutland District.
And Watson from the Washington District.
Scott back from Caledonia.
And we do expect Senator Bongartz from Bennington District to join us shortly. And you've met our committee assistant chief.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Christine Doherty. My day job is the Assistant Director of Public Works in Town of Williston. I am here today though as the President of Green Mountain Water Environment Association. Our association comprises, our membership is comprised of water, wastewater, and stormwater operators in the state of Vermont. So we bring a lot of experience and expertise in the topic of stormwater here with us today. We wanted to appreciate the opportunity to be with you and just provide some feedback on the bill that you're before you today. Just kind of get into this here real quick. Want to talk a little bit to start with the financing. This first section here really ties a lot of the financing to municipalities taking over these systems. And there's a lot of concern related to that. The grants related to financing in the past has not required municipalities to take over this. The CWIP grants particularly. These grants have been really successful. Municipalities have used these in the past to help communities make upgrades without having to take the communities to take over those systems. We really see no reason why that should actually change. It seems to me that the requiring the municipalities to take over the systems as a condition of these grants will may actually end up having a lower participation rate. When municipalities are being required to take over, these systems, there's not really, there's a lot of municipalities that don't want to do that. We've heard from some communities like South Burlington, where it does have a value to them, but we also heard that it doesn't have a value to all communities. And I think that's important to keep in mind as we're looking at this bill, that for communities where that doesn't make sense, they may not want to participate and they may not want to pursue grants. So we would really strongly consider, taking that part of it out and allowing the grants to continue as they have in the past and not tying them to the municipalities taking over. Moving on, there is really a significant need for financing as has been identified. Would agree that the cost for implementation on this of these 3-acre rule in between $70,000 to $100,000 per acre is about right, which, as you can imagine, then is going to be a significant cost. Right now, there's not a dedicated fund for that. For the 3-acre impervious. So we really would like to see dedicated funding for that. That does bring us to the sunsetting of the property transfer tax. And I do think that we do support that being extended and continue to provide funding for us. Would encourage other resources as they become available. And really making sure that those fundings stay consistent and dedicated. We also need to look at and would ask that that there's with the funding that is made available to regulated policy to regulated systems. So one of the challenges right now is if you look at the clean water funding, a lot of the funding right now is going to non-regulated programs, non-regulated stormwater projects. The challenge with that is that we're not getting phosphorus reduction credits for that in our TMDL. That doesn't really seem to make sense. And if that's going to be, if we're going to be funding non-regulated stormwater systems or projects, then ANR should really be taking the investment, the time to be and understand what phosphorus credits we're going to get for that, and making sure that we're getting credit for that as part of our TMDL. And it doesn't appear that we are getting that right now. If we are, then we should make that more transparent in kind of communication to the public, because I don't think that's happening.
if there's a question here, go ahead.
So can you identify at least one of the unregulated entities that we're talking about?
So the clean water service providers, so what's happened, so their whole program is geared to non-regulated stormwater programs and projects. I don't really have a lot of direct involvement with what they do, but all their funding,
That's what I thought.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
So yes, go ahead.
Just, I wasn't sure if we should ask questions or wait till you were done, so I just wanna ask about the first part of it.
Sure.
The funding and the municipalities in the bill being required to take them over the 3 acre parcels in order to get the grants.
Yes.
I hear you about how there are probably plenty of municipalities who would want to do that. Do you think municipalities would still apply for the grants and help do the work if they don't have ownership?
I think it's gonna depend on the municipalities and their capacity, right? I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of small communities that are volunteer run, and whether or not they have the capacity is gonna be a big question. I would really love to see, there's a lot of money at the agency, and there's a lot of resources there and expertise there, and it would be great if they can continue to expand what they've been doing. They're using a lot of resources right now. They've set up programs for engineers to work with the communities directly. They set up programs for contractors. They've got a lot of programs right now set up under the 3 acre program to work directly with communities. It's been pretty successful. Would love to see them continue to do that, moving forward. Really not sure why they need to push this on some municipalities. When the program that they've been working on, what they've been doing in the last year and a half, 2 years, appears to be working pretty successfully.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is that they've been doing that with ARPA money, which is no longer around. So I think that this bill is somewhat an attempt to figure out a funding source in the absence of those federal dollars.
Understood.
Yeah,
And that, again, that kind of goes back to what I was suggesting earlier. When you look at the clean water funding and the budget that they have, you have, I believe it was over $10 million that was going into stormwater projects associated with agriculture. There's been significant reductions in phosphorus already in the agricultural section. They've met a lot of the reductions that they've been trying to reach. At least based on what ANR has been saying they have. If that's the case, then maybe we can look at shifting some of those funds to other programs within the Clean Water Fund. We have over $8 million going to non-regulated programs. Maybe we can shift some of those funds. I'm not saying that there's gonna be an easy solution. It's a very costly program. Maybe we need to look at other programs and I don't have there's not a one solution here. I understand what you're saying. And I understand they use ANR or ARPA funding. But again, there does need to be there needs to be a longer term financing viable option here.
do you know, or did we get a map of where all of these where all of the impacted 3 acre places are? I'm just wondering, it must exist somewhere. Did we get it?
So there's a list, I'm not sure that we have that list on our website, but we can put it there.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it translated into map form, but it is, I've seen it broken out by
Into.
county, I believe.
there.
No, it's not, yeah, right, it's Pierce. No, it's not broken out by county, it's broken out by town, by municipality.
I just wonder how many, your Williston, is that what you said?
I am.
Williston, I just wonder. I would assume that most of them are in Chittenden County, because it's probably the most paved county.
So a lot of the 3 acres, I mean, it's based on watershed. So the initial rollout right now, so it's the idea of the 3 acre permit, and I deal with stormwater, I work within the stormwater sector, but ANR is really good.
Yeah, we have that's my.
So the initial rollout that they're doing right now is really based on the watersheds. And so the main lake is one of the major watersheds that they're looking at. So the idea is this is going to be rolled out in phases. And so the way that it stays out is spelled out in the
Right.
90/50 permit.
Right.
So the first phase is, I think, approximately 744 sites, spread throughout, the region. So there are, I believe, a number of them are in, Chittenden County region, but they do expand outside of that, Rutland and, even up in Franklin County, so.
Okay, thanks, sorry, carry on.
Okay.
I think there's another follow-up question here, and then we
Just along those lines, I know that, you always need a traffic cop with funding. Because a lot of the smaller municipalities they don't have the personnel to action that, where the cities do, the bigger, and they seem to get more of the funding. And it was the same with ARPA in my community, saying we're like, gee, what are we gonna do with all this money? We don't know, we don't have a plan, so. Almost need a plan to make sure that each municipality gets a proportion of that funding equitable, so.
Right.
Yeah.
It's even with the funding, it's still challenging. There's still even a lot of regulations and program restrictions. For citing these stormwater, these stormwater projects, especially at the municipal level. Municipalities are not really in the business of owning land. That's the other part that makes these projects really difficult for municipalities to participate in. Municipalities don't typically own land, so where do you site these projects or these facilities? It's really wise is these programs are best geared towards, developers, that actually own the land and can find places to place these facilities and really locate them as part of the development process. And doing that as part of new development and redevelopment, versus going back and doing this as part retroactively. I think that's one of the challenges that we're really facing with the retroactive implications for, retroactively applying this policy is that there's really a lot of land restrictions in locating these facilities that are needed. If there's questions, I'll move on to we were talking a little bit about just some of the challenges with the municipalities and I guess before I go into that, there is the one section here is talking about extending the filing deadline. Do you want to just make a general note of support for that? I think that would be valuable for a lot of the communities to be able to have that extra time. I know that there's been a lot of need in calls and requests for that. It would be valuable as it's been suggested before to checking with A&R to see how that will impact our TMDL obligations and with EPA, but I think that we should be okay with that now. Our requirement was to make sure that we had the 3-acre rule implemented, which we have, so we should be okay there, but I would confirm that with A&R. And then wanted to go and just touch back real quick to the role of municipalities and with these permits. One of the things that's not included in here that Green Mountain did ask for when this was being reviewed in the House side is that there's these situation that's kind of going on right now. So municipalities that can participate and want to participate were kind of there's a little bit of a disadvantage there that's being set up right now because the way the permitting structure is, the way the permit framework is set up right now, there's a permit called Municipal Roads General Permit, you may be familiar with, and there's the MS4 General Permit. And then you have these private operational discharge permit for stormwater. When a community has goes through the development process and the developer transfers the road to a municipality, that road was part of a operational stormwater, community stormwater permit. When that road gets transferred to the municipality and becomes a public road, that road then becomes part of either an MS4 permit or a municipal roads general permit. In doing that, the town then is obligated by the state to be a co-permittee to the private operational stormwater permit, and then also have a municipal roads general permit or the MS4 permit, both for the same road. What that does is it then makes it basically takes our negotiating power, away from the municipality. If they want to participate with the community, if they want to, take over the permit, or if they want to participate and help out with the grants. You're basically going in there and trying to negotiate as being obligated to be a permittee, right? You're not really being able to negotiate unfair terms. And so I think it'd be very valuable to communities, and it would give them a better place to start off these conversations if they were allowed to have separation of those two permits. And in order for that to happen, we need there to be we need the state, the A&R to be told to make that separation, that there needs to be an exemption for municipalities that are compliant with their MR2P or their MS4 permit, that they are not obligated to be a co-permittee to these private permits. And that will allow us to better negotiate in good faith when we want to support private permits in going after grants or taking over them. Because there's operations and maintenance agreements that have to go in place, and there's other processes that have to, things that have to be negotiated as part of that process. And we're kind of getting started, we're starting off behind the 8 ball.
So I have another question here, but I'm also just conscious of the time.
Yes,
And I'm sure you have a little bit more to go, yeah?
I could wrap it up, yep.
Okay, because what you're saying is actually, it's great, it's very interesting, and I don't want to cut you off. So it is okay, is it?
Go ahead, yeah.
Let's maybe let you finish your thoughts, and then we'll come back with.
We're good there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so go ahead with your question.
No, so what I'm hearing you saying is that it ends up, the municipality ends up having to use attorneys, that it's gonna cost them more money to be in that committee business. And one of the smaller ones, they have them, they don't have it. They don't
Right.
need them. So-
Right, exactly. We have to, a lot of, exactly, there's attorney fees that are associated with that, and unnecessary costs that are associated with that could be avoided. And it's happening, and this wasn't happening before the 90/50 permit, this was not happening with the frequency that we're seeing it now. But because of the implications of the 3-acre permit, because of the costs associated with it, because of the calculations of the roads and just the impacts, we're just seeing it like we've never seen before.
I don't think I quite understand that. I don't know. I don't understand the permit sufficiently.
Sure.
So I know we don't have a lot of time, so maybe
Okay.
I need to talk to you more about it. But I also,
I have Terry Shepherd, he's gonna walk you through a lot.
is he next on our?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
He's
So maybe,
he's gonna
okay.
give you an example of his own experience with this, and I think hopefully it'll help you
Okay.
understand
Maybe
how that.
light bulbs go off. I wanted to ask you though about one specific thing in the bill on page 7,
Okay.
or I don't know what page it's on yours, but I think 7. This is on lines 15 and 16. This is the part of when a municipality assumes full legal responsibility for the stormwater system
Okay.
on this 3-acre permit
Mhm.
of a residential subdivision.
Okay.
So you mentioned, municipalities are not in the business of owning land, and it doesn't sound like to me that this requires them to own the land, it just requires them to sort of maintain the system, which is kind of their system anyway, in the towns that have stormwater systems. So they wouldn't have to own the residential subdivision, they would just have to maintain the system.
Well, they're not necessarily gonna own the residential subdivision, no, but you have to take over, so you have to have legal control over where that stormwater system is, right? So you have to have legal access to the system, you have to have legal operational control of the system. Then you're responsible for that system. There's liabilities associated with that, because you have operational control over that system.
And would this be in this, and I'm trying to visualize what system means too, because,
So, yeah,
yeah. go
so a
ahead.
system would be like a gravel wetland, or like a dry pond, a wet pond, it can be.
Be a lot of different things, it's not necessarily the drains that drain into the town's stormwater, wastewater system. It can be lots of different things.
Right, so typically,
That sounds really stupid, I'm sure, but I'm just trying to figure it out.
Okay, so typically what happens is the municipality, when they have a public road, will be responsible, so if you have like a municipal roads general permit, that usually covers your municipal right of way. Your 64 feet or whatever your municipal right of way happens to be, that would be your catch basins, your stormwater drains, all your piping within that right of way. Your community, then outside of that, you have the systems that will be treated runoff from your private properties, your houses, your roofs, your driveways, those areas, and those are typically gravel wetlands or pond systems. And those are the systems that are usually located on HOA public spaces, so there's common lands, but the HOA will have dedicated and set aside. And so that's usually where these systems are located, and so that's, you'll have
Okay.
these that's what we call the systems, the stormwater treatment practice. And then, so then in order for a municipality to have legal control, you have to set boundaries around that, get an easement for that, and then have an agreement. And legal control means operational control, means you're the permittee, you're responsible, and
If it fails, you have to fix it.
and if something happens to somebody out there on it, then you're responsible too. There's liability risks that are associated with that, that municipalities have to consider as well.
Got it, okay.
So I have sorry.
No, go ahead. We need a field trip though.
Ooh, that'd be good. This could be the fodder for some good field trip.
Yeah, we could do
Yes.
stormwater and ag water field trip.
Yeah, yeah. About this section, the way I'm reading this municipal stormwater implementation formerly grant program, is that the money is all still there, it's all still available for municipalities, but this is adding a use to it. And so I guess I'm wondering about I was trying to make sure that this wouldn't somehow prohibit or hinder municipalities from using it in ways that they already use it for. I think that's true, right? Is that how you read it as well?
I think that, yeah, right, I don't think that this, I guess, sorry, I guess, I'm not sure I followed that.
No, it's all right. So the way I'm reading this language is it's expanding the potential uses of this money so that it doesn't restrict the projects that it would be available for now, it would still be available for in the future. This is just opening it up to.
I guess I see it the other way.
Oh, you do,
I
okay.
do, I see that this is,
Narrowing it.
it's, the money's still being able, it's not changing the use, the money is still being used the same way, right? So this is still clean water investment funding, right? So, still going to clean water projects, whether it's a municipal project or a private project, it's still going to a clean water project. The only difference is this is now saying that in order for you to get money, the town has to then take over the system at the end. The only reason why they're doing that, in my opinion, is because they want somebody at the end of the day to be responsible for the operation and maintenance of that system, because in the past, there's been failure of oversight of those systems, and there's been, in the early 2000s, we ended up with a lot of broken systems because there was a failure of oversight and management. But that really shouldn't fall to the municipalities and the, that should be a municipal responsibility. If the municipalities have the capacity and they want to take that on as a community, that should be a community decision. But as we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of small communities out there, small towns that are volunteer run, that don't have capacity to do this. And this is setting that up for something that could be really impactful. And there's a lot of concern around that.
Thank you. I feel like that is helping me wrap my head around this. So I appreciate that. All right, any other questions? Okay, thank you. All right, we're gonna move now to welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I brought a little picture board to help with my story. I'm Harry Shepherd, I'm Stowe's Public Works Director, and I hope to use this as a way of just trying to help you all understand what the challenges are on the ground for non-MS4 communities. I think our MS4 communities have been dealing with stormwater differently for years. They're more set up. They have utilities. So is not an MS4 utility town. But when Act 64 was passed, a number of challenges were presented to municipalities. Christina mentioned the Municipal Roads General Permit. We have over 100 miles of town highway and don't have the capacity to do what was being asked. So we hired consultants to kind of help us identify the segments and comply. We've invested approximately $50,000 in that effort. We have been able, over the course of the last 5 years, to meet our minimum thresholds for complying with the permit, the 15%. We take advantage of all of the grant and aid and such. But when we did our study, and I think we estimated that the total cost for the town for complying with the municipal roads general permit was going to be about $4 million. I recall when a VT Digger article was done on that, we were criticized pretty highly. I'll share that now that we've got 5 years of experience trying to make the upgrades, I think that number's low in reality. So there's real effort that the towns are putting in to comply with these municipal road general permits, and it's not insignificant. This project here is just an example of one. I chose this one because it actually shows our 2 3-acre sites. And it also shows a development where in 2008, the town took over a town highway. That has got us connected with the 3-acre stuff. This picture here, Main Street of Stowe and Stowe Village is right at the top. And many of the development phases that you see were part of a 40-year phase development project. Started in the 1980s by the Green Mountain Inn. They expanded the inn, they expanded condos, they built Copley Woodlands retirement community, and then a number of phases of residential development of Thomas Lane. All of the town highways drain to a large wetlands corridor that is culverted out to the north branch of the village. And one of the things I try to point out on this is that there's a lot of, I'm going to call it inequity, because we have property owners that drain to this system that aren't in, and we have property owners that are. And that is something that makes it really hard to have conversations with homeowners associations trying to establish partnership agreements in order to seriously entertain becoming co-permittees and taking on the responsibilities of that. And this here kind of shows, for the various phases of this development, who's in and who's not. And I think it's important to point out that many properties that are upgrading of our town highway, and frankly, causing some trouble for us in stormwater roads, they're not in. And so that is something that creates a lot of challenges for us. For our own,
Are they not in?
I had the same question.
Are they not in because they don't have 3 acres or
well, Copley Woodlands as an example has 2.9.
this is Copley Wood?
Correct. No, we have, this is Copley.
This is, okay.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
So the smaller ones that you say are not, these are all not in because they are small.
They are smaller, but I think it also ties in some with interpretations from the agency, the department, regarding previous permits. It's really complicated to kind of try to pin down who be negotiating with, because there's probably a half a dozen various stormwater permits on this development. exactly why they're not in, it's hard for me to understand. I really do think in the stormwater world, if we're gonna really be serious about regulating this stuff, we gotta be thinking about it at a watershed basis and who drains to where.
Is the elementary school not in?
The elementary school is not in,
Is it because they just don't have enough impervious surface?
they're a little less than 3 acres. But there's a question here because there's some provisions in the rule that kind of deals with contiguous properties. And next to the Stowe Elementary School is our Memorial Park. Memorial Park is in, and there was some thought for a long time that we were gonna have to include the elementary school because it's contiguous property. But we've got a determination from the department now that they're gonna separate that out and they're handling schools separately, I think that's what I've heard.
Green school thing?
Yeah, so they're trying to do something with the schools outside of this, the permit, and they've told us that the elementary school does not need to be included.
Okay.
I want to point out, we've spent about 50,000,
Who told you that the school?
the DEC.
Oh. So I was on the impression they were. They weren't, but then they were. So.
Okay,
They've had money already. It's not just-
I heard that they've got money to do.
It's a different program for students.
So, to deal with our own 2 acre sites, we have 2 of them in town. One of them is our Memorial Park next to our school. The other is our, highway department and wastewater plant. We've spent approximately $50,000 doing the engineering feasibility analysis. The results of that are that we don't think we can implement any of the management practices at the elementary school or at the Memorial Park. The soils and groundwater conditions just aren't conducive to it. And we anticipate that we're gonna have approximately a $60,000 impact fee. Our highway garage and wastewater plant is we can possibly implement some of the practices. And our work in trying to figure this thing out, we're estimating that it's gonna be somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million to implement the practices on this site. The stormwater practices don't kind of recognize like some of the other utility challenges. So we have, and our wastewater plant has got piping everywhere up and around. And so implementing a constructed gravel wetlands or some of these other types of practices on that site, we're likely to be looking at having to relocate underground utilities, to kind of make it happen. These are really real costs. I think one of the things that we're struggling with as a state with this thing is I don't think really getting in focus the real cost benefit of what we're possibly going to achieve in some of these practices and how much it's going to cost. Our colleague Tom DePietro was here with you guys, and I think gave a number of $400,000. I think that's just for Lake Champlain and Memphis Montauk watersheds. But I think the intent is to also kind of expand this statewide. And I submit that when that actually occurs, I think we're gonna have to start with a B rather than an M for what it's gonna take to implement these efforts. And so I want to try to get that kind of cost benefit perspective on the table here because it's a substantial challenges for towns. And for this project in particular now, the developer of the project who still has, he's the permittee for all the stormwater permits. Now he's seeking to work with the various entities that have some of the impervious area in this thing. And this table here to the left kind of demonstrates it nicely. It's just a function of impervious areas. But basically what this thing is suggesting is the town would have responsibility for about a third of it. The only system that could possibly be implemented here is a practice in phase 1 of Tom's Lane. Small stormwater pond as possible, but we still think that there's going to be an impact fee that all of these entities will be responsible for. And then we've got to get this practice constructed and more importantly operated. And our biggest concern is this notion of being a co-permittee. And I've asked the question a number of times, tell us what the intent is, if our partners default. We're dealing with homeowners associations, entities that aren't necessarily totally organized and functional. We don't have any easements or ownership interests, or operational control. We're gonna be spending considerable legal expenses trying to work out a stormwater management agreement with 5 different entities here, in order to try to figure out who's responsible for what, and to try to protect the town's long-term interests in terms of, having to actually maintain and operate these things. It's a significant lift for towns, and I question the benefit. I think we all need phosphorus reduction in Lake Champlain, and that's the goal. We get it. We know we need to get there, but there are probably a lot of other ways to achieve that goal than the model that the department has created here. And the model that the department has created here is a real burden on the ground for towns. It still has some capacities to deal with this stuff. Most of the rest of our state doesn't. And I think it's important to kind of make that distinction between kind of the MS4 communities, which I think the bill before you is kind of focused on them, versus kind of the rest of the state, but we're outside of the MS4 world. These are big lifts for towns. This is a potential high risk, high liability for towns, and I seek a better way. And Christina mentioned it briefly in the stormwater rules. There's an exemption section. There's exemptions for farmers that are using agricultural practices. There's an exemption for forestry efforts, forestry work up in the hills and in the woods. I think it would be a relatively simple thing to include an exemption for town highways. As long as we're compliant with the permit requirements for the municipal roads general permit or the MS4 for those communities. I think that that's how we should try to solve dealing with the impervious area for town highways, not forcing municipalities to go into business arrangements with a bunch of homeowners associations that aren't really interested in being faithful partners.
Thank you. Just want to pause. Well, any questions, Mr. Shepherd? Okay, thank you. So I want to pause here because we have legislative council. We've had Senator Chitton with us briefly.
We asked him to come back.
And so hopefully he is able to, but I know we only have you for a very limited amount of time. Just to give a little context here, Senator Chitton had introduced a bill related to stormwater that is not this bill, but is similar. And so the intention of having him in here was to give us an overview of what is in that bill, see what the ideas are, what are the big ideas that are there that are maybe not in this bill, just so that all the ideas are on the table. And I know we also have Snre with us, who I understand if we had Senator Chitton, we would be transitioning to him right now, but we also have our legislative.
Just run through the big ideas.
That would be great, and then, but if. Oh, Senator, S24.
Sorry.
If Senator Chitton comes back, I'd love to still give him some time to introduce his version of this. Hopefully he'll be back soon.
Yes.
So this is Mike Regretti with Dutch Council. I'll try to move quickly. The bill S24 is kind of what initiated H481. So some of the concepts in here are similar, if not the same, but 481 has built on them or revised them. The first change really about municipalities assuming responsibilities for subdivision. That was fleshed out more in H481. The bill does also extend the deadline for the 3 acre in Champlain and Metro Magog. S24 would have removed the deadline for those watersheds outside of Metro Magog and Champlain. So there wouldn't have been a 3-acre permit requirement outside of the Champlain and Memphremagog watersheds, but the House Committee decided to go another way. The other big change is repealing the sunset of the property transfer tax surcharge for clean water. That was done in H481. H481 included a couple of additional conforming changes because of findings language that I found. Another big difference is that S24 had a special fund that was specifically dedicated to provide grants to municipalities to assist in the stormwater permitting of residential subdivisions or orphan systems in the state. In the House, EEC came forward and proposed that you remove that special fund and replace it with the 2 grant programs. And revising those grant programs to develop lands program and the municipal program. And that's what the House did. They replaced that special fund with those 2 financing programs, and the House dedicated $5 million for the municipal program. S24 would have dedicated $5 million to that special fund that it created. And then the last thing that S24 did is what is in H481 is it changed the authority for stormwater utilities to set their equivalent residential unit based on the median versus the average impervious surface. So same language as in H481.
Great. Super. All right, thank you. Let's be quick. Any questions? That was so fast. Any questions? Okay, great. And hopefully we will have Senator Chittenden back here soon. But until then, let's go back to Snre. Welcome.
Great, thank you for having me. For the record, I'm Catherine Dimitrick. I'm Executive Director of Northwest Regional Planning Commission, and I'm here representing the Regional Planning Commissions. I also have with me Charlie Baker from Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission in case there's any Chittenden County specific questions that might come up. And I know we're well represented today. So first, I just wanted to note that although it's not included in the written testimony, which I will forward again, because I don't see it posted yet, but I'll just run through it really quickly. We share the concerns about the change in requiring municipalities to take over these permits. You're well represented today by municipalities who have staff who can come and testify with you about those challenges. And so you can magnify that challenge 100-fold when you think about those municipalities that don't have staff who are available to come and testify before you today. It's a burden for those municipalities, and especially it's really unfair to the private property owners. If you happen to live in a municipality that doesn't have the capacity to step in, you are still have the same current burden as the private property owners who live in municipalities who do have capacity to step in. So I think there's a real issue with making that change. So a lot of your earlier witnesses brought that up, and I'd like to echo that concern.
That has to be the echo of what's more, so I was writing down an important point.
Yes.
So give me that point.
So if the grant program is changed so that the 3-acre, those properties that fall in the 3-acre permit can only access the grant funds if the municipality agrees to take over the permit. That is a long-term problem for more rural and smaller municipalities. Do you want me to step
Yes,
Yes.
is that okay?
Absolutely.
Yes, super.
Happy to be you at the table.
Welcome.
Hello.
Yay,
Yeah.
wonderful to have you. So we have started some conversation about stormwater, but you know, this is something that you brought to us, so I would love to hear your thoughts.
Great. Thank you very much, Chair. So S24 is what I'm here to talk about, but I understand that there's a bill that has components of S24 that you're taking up. I just appreciate you all taking on this important topic. There's a lot of things for us, and stormwater is something that many constituents across multiple areas of my district and beyond the state reached out. They're literally impassioned pleas, just asking, can we please do this better? So I'm going to read this just for the folks at home, but this is written and on your website, and then I'm happy to take questions. So this is offered as the rationale, small typo there, inspiring S24, an act relating to stormwater management. Constituents from across my district, South Burlington, Shelburne, Richmond, Williston, and from around the state have reached out over the past 8 months because they are getting very scary letters from the Department of Environmental Conservation regarding expired stormwater permits. Our constituents are being asked to solve problems that they don't understand with resources that they don't have, using common land that doesn't exist on impossible timeframes. They are from neighborhood developments that were built under different rules that didn't require the formation of an association, creating impossible situations where they can't coordinate with all the individual landowners of the properties that were included in the original stormwater permit issued decades ago. These are not wealthy developers. These are homeowners, families, and individuals who received letters demanding they rectify stormwater issues stemming from permits issued decades ago. These permits were granted under regulations vastly different from those in place today, and they're being asked to solve complex engineering problems, navigate intricate regulatory landscapes, and fund substantial infrastructure upgrades, all without the necessary expertise, resources, or even a clear understanding of the original permits. This leaves residents in an impossible situation. How can they coordinate and implement solutions across multiple individual properties? They're being asked to do the impossible. The core of the issue is the perceived inequity. My constituents rightly point out that these demands are being levied solely on properties that triggered stormwater permits under the 3-acre rule passed in the statute about 7 years ago. This runs contrary to the all-in principle of stormwater management that I often hear many people espouse and agree to, where everyone is expected to contribute to solutions. It is fostering resentment and division within communities, pitting neighbor against neighbor. Municipalities, understandably, are hesitant to assume liability by filing incomplete applications on behalf of those fragmented neighborhoods. They recognize the inherent complexity and the potential for long-term financial burdens, and are being advised by municipal lawyers that their assistance to their residents will assume the liability of these stormwater mandates. The emotional toll is significant. At a South Burlington meeting, a resident poignantly compared this situation to a school district asking students to design a curriculum. At a Richmond meeting, a resident broke down in tears, overwhelmed by the stress this adds to their already strained finances. Residents in Shelburne are pleading for legislative intervention to empower municipalities to take stewardship of these necessary improvements. They understand their responsibility to contribute, but they also recognize the impossibility of some of the current demands. They believe that cities and towns with their existing infrastructure and expertise are far better equipped to manage these complex multi-year projects that span property lines. S24 is an attempt to bring relief to our constituents wanting to do their part to clean our waterways in a fair, rational, and resource-conscious way. This bill proposes to amend requirements related to the permitting of stormwater systems in the state by extending the deadline by which owners of impervious surface subject to 3-acre impervious surface permits must complete permitting. This bill will also allow municipalities that assume full legal responsibility for stormwater systems to access municipal impact fees to assess municipal impact fees on users of the stormwater system. In addition, the bill extends from July 1st, 2027 to July 1st, 2036, the assessment of 0.22% clean water surcharge on the property transfer tax, and the bill would also establish the local community implementation special fund to provide grants to municipalities to assist in stormwater permitting of residential subdivisions or orphan systems to the state. I asked this committee to take action on our stormwater mandates, and I appreciate the testimony you're giving to this to give relief to homeowners being asked to do the impossible. The last thing I'll say is, I don't understand half of this, and I'm trying to, but I think I'm representing my constituents in coming at this complex conversation, trying to navigate it to do what's right in a way that is fair and equitable to all their neighbors. So I'm just trying to give voice to those constituents, and I just appreciate the House passing some bill and language that I think is moving in the right direction, and you all taking some of your time as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Any questions for Snre? Yes, ma'am.
So we just, I know you weren't in the room, thank you for this, by the way, but you were not in the room, but we just got testimony from municipalities that are saying, we don't want to take responsibility. And what I'm hearing from you is you're hearing from constituents that residents don't want to take responsibility. So I kind of wonder who should, and I don't know if you, in talking to your people, have heard, it sounds like you have a lot of neighborhoods in your district that are relevant. I know a few in my district, but it sounds like that you have more.
What I tried to do, and I really appreciate Michael Brady, who's been phenomenal with this, thank you, Michael, for all your help, is try to find ways to reduce the liability of the municipalities to aid in the assistance of finding these solutions. So I have heard hesitance of the municipality in filing the permit with the residents, because then all of a sudden they have a great deal of ownership, responsibility, and that can sometimes also be perceived inequity, and they don't, the smaller towns don't have that capacity or the depth of coverage. So I also love the idea Senator Harrison has been putting forward with making it easier to do stormwater utilities so that we could access a greater depth of coverage of expertise. I too am I've served in city council for 8 years, so I don't want to put a lot on municipalities without addressing their concerns. I will say this, municipalities are structured to address these types of situations, much more so than 43 neighbors in fragmented forms that don't have HOAs because they just didn't do it. So I see municipalities as where this conversation should be. I would like, I think we're trying to find ways for those municipalities to feel better about helping constituents without necessarily taking the full burden. In South Burlington, that's where the conversation kept going. It was to allow, maybe make it easier to have special assessments on defined districts that would benefit from this. There are constitutional concerns, and this is where Michael O'Grady is in the room. I'm sure he's going to clarify it better than I, but just finding tools to allow municipalities to assess properties within an area that were deemed by the state to apply for stormwater, so as to streamline that process and give them more tools in order to thread that needle. I think municipalities play an important role, and if it's not the small towns, maybe it's the CCRPC. I see Charlie Baker in the room. Love to have Charlie Baker fix this for Chittenden County and all of his counterparts across the state. County government.
Yeah.
Great. Agreed.
Well, it makes me wonder about this having such an interesting question, like where does the responsibility sit, or where should it sit? And it's thinking about stormwater utilities as a way to potentially be a mechanism to catch everybody, and not have these inequities baked in. This is maybe a conversation for offline, but I'm just gonna speculate, I wonder if there's space for studying how this could be implemented either at the county level, or RBC level, or somehow at the state level. So yes.
So just to add some context, we've been dealing with this in Raleigh County since 2015. And that, it was kind of like we had public hearings, A&R came down, or DEC came down. And it was basically, yeah, it's a real program. We came up with some money, $49,999 so you can hire, at least get your permitted application. And then we didn't hear anything more about it. So 10 years. Finally, I started getting some emails from people in Chittenden County because I was involved down in Rutland County, and I sent an email to Senator Chittenden. And as soon as he got involved, everything seems to get rolling. So I give you credit for it.
That's shocking.
Yeah, so and it's a necessary conversation. It's a problem, it's gotta get fixed. Everybody that's involved with it wants to do the right thing. So thank you for the bill.
I also want to credit you, Cam, the new deputy. He's been phenomenal in working with us on these conversations and trying to help find some middle ground. So I just want to give shout out or word to that. What I heard across the spectrum, not just at the deputy level, but the engineers and in the towns, they all just agreed we can do this better. That what we have now is hard to defend. And that's why I think we had to bring this conversation here, because I remember multiple public meetings where the engineers were just reading the statute. This is what we're doing. But I could tell they were really saying, we don't agree with it, it's not fair, we gotta do this better. And that's what I'm trying to bring the conversation.
Good
Yeah.
job.
Yeah, thank you. Super. Any other questions for Senator Cheney?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Super. So we'll switch back to Ms. Dimitrich. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me, I guess. So it was great to hear Senator Chin's perspective as well in advance of the remainder of my comment. So I'm just gonna dive into H41 and offer the Regional Planning Commission comments on that bill. In terms of section 1, there's language in D2 that talks about impact fees, requiring a capital plan that a new development can pay for. And our request is simply to remove the word impact from that paragraph, because impact fees in the it's in section 1 D2.
Yeah, page 1.
Page 1.
Line 18.
Oh, impact.
Impact fees in the stormwater world have a different meaning than impact fees in the municipal world, and we want to make sure it's clear that we're not talking about the municipal world impact fees. Just change that to fees and remove the word impact, it will provide more flexibility there. The section 2, repealing the sunset of the property transfer tax clean water surcharge, the regional planning commission support that repeal. Jumping ahead to section 6, which is specific grants to support financing for these projects. Regional planning commissions do support these grants. I'll add the caveat that I mentioned my first round testimony about concerns about making available to property owners who live in municipalities that aren't able to take on these permits. And then just note that we think it would be great to add some language there to coordinate these grants with the clean water service providers. And I'm hoping that you know what I mean when I say clean water service provider. Okay, great. I figured you were all briefed on that. Because they'd be working in the same areas and working with many of the same potential property owners, that would be important.
Could you say that suggestion again? I think I.
Sure, we just think it would be great to add language to that section to require that the whoever administers that grant program coordinate with the clean water service provider in the area. If it doesn't happen to be the clean water service provider that's administering it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Section 7 is the language on C, is the language on the ongoing $1 million allocation to this particular program. And the regional planning commissions generally are uncomfortable with that. There is a process for prioritizing funds within the Clean Water Board. And we think that that system should be retained and allowed to function as is. Section 8 has a one-time allocation for this program, and we would support that because it is a one-time allocation. But the ongoing $1 million allocation, we would not support, just because we think the existing system for prioritizing the budget should be utilized. And then finally, section 10 is the study committee that was established in 481, looking at the idea of a regional utility. And so I'll just say at the beginning that if we need to create a regional utility to simply solve one particular narrow permit that's requiring us to meet the TMDL, maybe we need to look at the complexity of that one particular narrow permit rather than needing to create a whole governance structure in order to simply implement that one particular piece of our TMDL. So regional planning commissions have several suggestions on this section. First, we would like a seat. We think it would be important for regional planning commissions to have a seat on a regional utility study. Second, we would like to suggest that the report timeline be moved up to November 15th, 2026 to give the legislature time to absorb any recommendations prior to the next session. And both of those recommendations were supported by DEC in their testimony on Friday. And then finally, in addition to examining the structure of a regional stormwater utility, we also think that the study committee should look at two things related to the 3-acre permit specifically. One being to expand opportunities for how natural resources-based approaches and offsite natural resource-based solutions could be utilized to come in compliance with the 3-acre permit. And second, we'd like to.
Can you give me an example of a little house site?
Yeah, so for example, you might have a mobile home park that's located along a river. And perhaps you have an adjacent site that has a wetland that could be utilized with some treatment to do that. Or you could have something offsite altogether where there's no space where your development is, but somewhere else in the same watershed, there's a project that you could pay for that would achieve a phosphorus reduction. And right now you can do that under the 3-acre permit, but the ability to do that is extremely narrow in how it's defined. And we think there's an opportunity to look at that and see if those opportunities could be brought.
That was recommended down in Rutland County, public hearing, and they said, DEC said no.
Right, so we think that we should look at that again. rather than just going to no. And then secondly, we'd like to just look at the premise of the 3 acre permit more broadly, to see if there should be a prioritization for compliance for those 3 acre permittees that are hydrologically connected, which is a fancy way of saying near a waterway. So should we be prioritizing those that are actually more closely related to a direct drainage that is going to actually impact phosphorus, rather than simply prioritizing all of them equally if you have 3 acres of impervious surface? So we think there should be a real effort of looking at that. That is the structure that's used for the municipal roads general permit, so it's not all roads in every town that need to be improved, it's only those that are hydrologically connected or close to a waterway. So we'd like those 2 points added to the study committee to be examined. The whole point being, you've heard some concerns a lot of people raised, and I'm sure you hear more. Let's use that 2-year extension to actually look at this and come up with a system that works better and still meet our standards of compliance.
One question for you. So I'm glad that Senator Williams asked about the offsite solutions. Can you give me an example of the natural resources based solutions?
The one that I gave about the wetland and using you could either construct a gravel wetland, a new wetland, or you could utilize an existing wetland and expand the area and use that as a pre-treatment prior to the water flowing into the wetland.
But that's not allowable now.
Not always.
Okay.
So DEC will say yes, but then you ask more questions and you still get to yes, but it's a very narrow path to get there.
Okay. Question?
Yeah, thanks. I've heard the term wetland and I also see it on this map, on your map. I'm assuming it's a different type of wetland than the natural protected wetlands. They're, right, these are like human-made wetlands that are
Constructed
used
wetlands.
to drain stormwater into, not wetlands that are protected wetlands that we are then draining stormwater into, right?
It's getting a little beyond my expertise, but
Okay.
my understanding is that you can actually create areas adjacent to those protected wetlands that would then use some of the functions of the wetlands to take some of that runoff that's been pre-treated. So yes.
Okay.
But it wouldn't be,
That seems
it wouldn't be like
to me.
a pipe into a protected well, it wouldn't be that, not at all. But it would be utilizing the existing functions of a wetland
Okay.
to.
Any further questions?
No, that's great.
Yeah, thank you. I always appreciate it when people come with specific language suggestions, reference to, where in the bill we should make changes. So thank you so much.
Right. Thank you.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's on over. Oh, great, thank you, so it's not this,
Okay, very good.
All right, thanks for.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay. All right, so we are going to switch our mindset to a different bill, to House 124, and we have Ms. Perry, welcome.
I'll try to keep it short and get back on track.
You're good.
For the record, Amber Perry, Vermont Farm Bureau. Vermont Farm Bureau supports S 124. We believe that the water quality of non-point source discharges on farms should reside throughout the agency of ag. And that the point source discharges can shift over to the agency of ANR. I know there was talk last week about where the RAP should go, and we believe that the RAP should still stay at the agency of ag. That's their expertise. We understand that the EPA has concerns about that dual agency approach. Our farmers know the staff at the agency of ag, and they're comfortable with them being on the farms. We see that the dual approach could be vital in that transition period, and ANR can act as the enforcement, but then the staff from agency of ag can act as the liaison to kind of meld everything together. We also are in support of the section 9, the community stakeholder group. And we would like to say that should remain. This shift from one agency to the other is bigger than just the people that are taking the time to come in and testify. And allowing the section to remain will allow more farmers and stakeholders to have a seat at the table and to be a part of the process. We all know that farmers are busy people especially starting in the spring and continuing into late fall. So just being mindful of their schedules and when we schedule those stakeholder meetings to make sure to get more farmers at the table at a time that is convenient for them. We also talked last week about that permitting piece. We talked with some of our farmers and if we could find a way to have it so it's just one permit needed for the CAPO versus a CAPO permit and an LFO and an MFO, they would find that to be easier. And farmers exhibit a profound commitment to their craft and their community, often facing numerous challenges and hardships with resiliency and determination. Their dedication to improving water quality in Vermont is a testament to this unwavering commitment. Despite the difficulties, they remain committed to their efforts to ensure that the practices contribute positively to the environment. They diligently work on their farms, adhering to required agricultural practices and striving to meet regulatory needs. This dedication is not only a reflection of their professional responsibilities, but also their deep connection to the land and the role in sustaining natural resources of Vermont. The farmers' willingness to engage with regulatory agencies, adapt to new regulations, and participate in community stakeholder groups underscores their proactive approach to environmental stewardship and their commitment to long-term sustainability to their farm and the broader ecosystem. Great, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Great.
I appreciate that. Yeah, go ahead.
So the dual permit point,
Yeah.
it feels like that was just what we talked about in a totally different context. The MFO and LFO, and this might be a question for our council, so yeah, I'm trying to understand the. Right now, the MFO and LFO permits are required, for the required agricultural practices, correct?
Correct.
And so what you're saying is, if you get a CAPO permit, you shouldn't have to have an LFO and MFO.
If we can make that a one permit process.
A one.
That would be
Okay,
great.
that. So having them be basically combined is what you're seeking, or to have one or the other?
One or the other or combined in a way that we're not having farmers spending multiple time
Right,
filling out permits.
right, okay.
And maybe that's something that comes from the stakeholder group, I don't, where we have more farmers at the table.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm mulling, so, alright, thank you.
I'm in the building can ask.
Yes, Michael, radio, so, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Great. Okay, thank you so much. All right, and so we were able to get Secretary Moore with some language changes, today was very exciting. But it looks like she is not here yet. 11:15. So we have a bonus 5 minutes. So we'll take a little break and
Always say deserve it.
It's for the lawyers.
A level, right?
Yeah. If Michael Grady comes in.
If he comes.
Morning.
Good morning.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're live.
Okay, morning, this is Natural Resources and Energy coming back from a break. It is still Tuesday, April 1st, and we're joined by Secretary Moore. Speaking about S-124 and some potential changes. Now, question, do you have a printout? Is it online? Do you want? It's online.
I was gonna say, it should be online.
Okay, where did you get that beautiful picture?
Catherine.
Is that right, Gabe?
Yeah. Okay, lovely. Cool, so this is gonna be under your name for today. Yes, okay, let's see if I have
The link,
Oh, I sent it to Emma.
I should have it, although it's not in my calendar anyway.
No, that's me.
Sorry, I feel like if we do this. Oh, I may have it right here.
Nope. I'll send it to you again.
Thanks.
Sorry.
No, I'm sure I'll need. So, good morning.
Good morning.
For the record, I'm Julie Moore. I'm the Secretary of Natural Resources, and I'm pleased to be here this morning to talk a little bit about S-100/S-124. We have a handful of further proposed changes I would like to walk you through. Hot off the presses update from EPA, I'm pleased to be able to share. And just happy to answer questions you might have in trying to hopefully help get this to a position of being ready to say yes to. See if I can join the presentation. Not yet, but you all have it in front of you, is that correct?
You didn't get it yet?
No, it's
So slow.
processing.
Yeah.
Certainly thinking of it. All right. Oh, here it is. Great.
Really slow.
Yeah, it's just got me sitting here wanting to join it, thinking if it wants to join a meeting. All right, I maybe we'll just wrap. And then if the opportunity presents, I will jump into the Zoom. So the first slide just provides some background and context. In terms of sort of how we got here and where we are currently at. So this work dates back to September of this year, sort of in earnest, although the petition was filed 2 years prior. And that was when we received a letter from EPA asking us to prepare a corrective action plan. So that indicated, I'll share my screen. So, and they asked us to submit, within 90 days, that draft corrective action plan, which we did in December. In January, they wrote us a letter back with feedback. I would describe it as generally positive with the approach we laid out in the corrective action plan. But asked us for more detail, more specifics. And so in March, we did submit an updated draft corrective action plan to EPA. And included with that submittal was the language in S-100, which we provided as an attachment.
There's a.
So the petition that was filed by CLF and the Lake Champlain Committee was 2 years ago?
It was in March of 2022. And so EPA did their own investigation, own set of file reviews, convened. us as the Clean Water Act delegated entity and the petitioners in several meetings over the summer to talk about their observations and what they thought would lead to successful resolution, and then ultimately sent us a letter in September.
Thank you.
And so we have that since over the last couple of weeks been involved in some ongoing and informal dialogue with EPA. And that's really what's reflected in the proposed changes I'm gonna walk through on the following slides in terms of language that they think is necessary. Happy to provide you with a sort of strikeout highlight if helpful once we get through this, but just want to give you a sense. The changes are relatively modest, I would say, and again, helping clarify. So these first two slides are actually changes to Title VI as opposed to Title 10. So these are the parts of the bill that are in S-124 but weren't in S-100. But again, just defining who is required to have a CAFO permit, and then trying to align language throughout the statute about obligations. The word promptly here being the change that's sort of featured in a number of different spots. Then there's some definitional changes. So what a direct discharge means. In addition to the definition of person, when we're talking about waters, making sure we're clear about waters of the state versus waters of the US, which is an important term when it comes to the Clean Water Act. Couple of just cleanup changes, but the one at the bottom of this page, maybe something you want to dig into, and I'm happy to pause wherever for conversation if you have questions. And I should have started by also introducing AMR General Counsel Catherine Guessing is with me, so she can help with some of that clarity too, because a lot of this discussion that's reflected in these changes has really been taking place at the lawyer level as opposed to the leadership level or even the technical staff.
A question, there's a question on the page 19, the waters definition.
Mark, I can go back.
Yeah, it's on your slide 5, I think. Are they suggesting adding the language and waters of the United States as defined under the Federal Clean Water Act? Is in the definition of waters?
Go ahead. Catherine Guessing, General Counsel for the Agency of Natural Resources. One of the comments that EPA made is that they wanted to make sure that it was really clear that waters of the United States are included as part of the definition of waters of the state.
Okay,
So that's
federal
what that-
waters,
okay.
waters of the US are a subsection of
Yes.
waters of the state, essentially.
Mhm.
So, again, a couple of changes around point source versus providing a little bit more clarity in that space in the waters of the US again. Again, this is really getting at truing us up with federal regulations when it comes to CAFO definitions. As I say, these are pretty dry, but important in making sure we have that consistency throughout. A set of changes to the powers of the secretary when it comes to the CAFO permit requirements, including the clarification Catherine just suggested, making clear waters includes waters of the US. And then some clarity around agricultural stormwater discharges. There's a little bit of a tension around the definition of CAFO, or at least something that requires further clarification, which is by definition, any large animal feeding operation, so exceeding a certain number of animal numbers is a CAFO. But those, even though those are called CAFOs, they only need a discharge permit or a CAFO permit if they are actively discharging. So trying to gain that clarity with these changes. In terms of the This one I may have to pitch to Kathy.
I was just gonna say that, in the context of a large CAPO definition, there was language that was taken out of the definition section, but then it's reinserted into the permitting section so that it makes it really clear when A&R will issue a permit, and you'll see that a little bit later on.
Great,
In the
thank you.
legislature.
So this again is just some clarifying language around some of the prohibitions that fall under discharge permits and making clear that the secretary, in this case, the Secretary of Natural Resources, is empowered to take appropriate steps to secure compliance. And then is this the change, Catherine, you were speaking to?
Correct.
Where we were adding that
On page 37 on one.
Oh, in terms of the definition of,
Right, that a large CAPO is not required to have a CAPO permit unless it is
Except on
discharged.
and this is, right, okay, that, thank you,
Yeah,
right,
so
thinking of that formatting.
it would be better if we picked, or if the feds had picked different words rather than using the same word in two different contexts, but we feel this clean.
Yeah.
Big
Question, yes.
Yeah, so we just got testimony from the Farm Bureau about their concern about having two different permits, an MFO / or LFO permit and the CAFO permit. Can you talk about that, when that would happen?
So I think on the LFO side is probably where that is most likely to happen, although happy to defer to Catherine to jump in here, but there are, I would call them land use considerations that are covered by an LFO permit that are not covered by a CAFO permit. So things like odors and vectors, flies, and traffic are all things that are reviewed as part of an LFO permit application that would not be considered under the CAFO program is framed out here, which is really focused on the Clean Water Act obligations.
Okay.
And
So
so,
the MFO, LFO permits are broader in
Correct.
scope. Okay.
and so I don't think the statute actually provides for folks to obtain CAFO permit coverage and still not have the obligations for some of those land use components that are covered under the LFO.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, Catherine guessing again. I believe there is a provision in the ag bill that that waives the permit fees when there are two permits in play. And this is gonna be a part of the continuing discussion in the stakeholder groups. And when we issue permit, we have to go through a public process for that, as well as when we issue the rules, we have to go through a public process. So we're gonna be having those continuing conversations with ag and farmers about how we navigate that. And I think our goal is to be as efficient as possible and not have like competing regulatory.
So they might have to get two permits, but they wouldn't have to pay two permit fees.
Also, just, sorry, as long as we're paused here, I just want to acknowledge that I'm really fast. I'm gonna need some time to like digest some of this.
Absolutely.
And
My hope is in putting these into a slide format with the citing chapter and verse in the bill, that it allows that sort of time for review.
yes.
And if there are further questions, happy to provide there.
I do think I will have one once, because I am very interested in that letter.
Yes.
So I want to let you get through all that you need to get through, and then I may have some questions, but
Sure.
yeah.
I think this may be, this is the last of the set of
Okay.
tangents, so this is just around ag stormwater and some definition there. So in terms of the proposed next steps, I know there's a second set of changes that have been put forward by members of the environmental interest community. Excuse me. And sort of need to look at those in alignment with the expectations from EPA. We're sort of in the middle of this conversation, and need to make sure we're satisfying EPA to a point where they can approve our corrective action plan. My hope is to be, we are in a position to propose any further modifications beyond what's contained in this presentation to the committee by close of business tomorrow. We also, at the same time, are working to finalize our corrective action plan with EPA. So we talked a lot about the language in S-100, knowing that that was particularly time sensitive, but expect that they will complete their review of other portions of the corrective action plan. That's probably a good place to pause. I can share copies of this letter that we received this morning from EPA. But I would summarize it as it essentially says, they see F-100 as being on the right track, consistent with their expectations. That said, they also believe we are likely to have to come back next session with potentially some additional requests as we build out our program. One of the folks copied on this letter, well, maybe not, copied on the electronic version of this letter I received is Mark Sanborn, who is the new Region 1 administrator. I believe he will be announced officially today. He previously was the deputy commissioner of the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services for a couple of years, most recently, and so does have working knowledge and experience in this space, and we're really pleased to know that he's on board. But I'm also hopeful this letter helps give confidence that the approach being considered by the committee is consistent with the expectations EPA has established for us. And then finally, feel it's really important that we move quickly to initiate some stakeholder engagement, particularly focused on the agricultural community. I know there's a lot of language related to that in S-100, S-124, but also just know that we are doing that informally, even as we speak, knowing that it's essential to have ag community input as we build.
Any questions for Secretary Moore? Yes, go ahead.
Would it be possible, to provide a draft with the highlighted changes in it? I know that's more work for Catherine.
No, it already exists.
Oh, it already exists. That would be helpful for me and probably others to track the changes within the
Sure. Yes, go ahead.
Unless you did already, and I missed it, would it be possible to receive a copy of that petition?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want a copy of the corrective action plan too, or just the initial petition?
Just the initial petition.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, we're happy to submit it.
There was one edit that you had in there that was a little confusing to me. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, I have it as slide 8 of your presentation. It's about waters of the state. Oh no, I'm sorry, it was about waters of the United States. I'm sorry, yeah, no, actually, I think it might have been, I'm sorry, slide 6. Because we had talked about, I was appreciating the definition of waters being inclusive of waters of the United States to make it clear that is included, but it's broader than that. And so the page 24, line 2 to 6. I was interested in why we were specific about waters of the United States in this particular instance and not just waters. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I'll defer to Catherine.
Well, I think ultimately the decision about whether we use waters of the state or waters of the United States kind of throughout the, except in the definition. throughout the document is, you know, for the legislature to decide, we just need to be consistent, right? And the original document had waters of the United States in it, and that's why it ended up in the slide.
So we are,
And that particular one relates to, I believe, the definition of a medium farm operation, and when you get the markup, you'll see
Okay.
where that language is plugged in. It tracks the federal definition almost.
Okay,
So,
thank you. And I have another sort of general question. It sounds like you all have received some specific feedback on language, you know, things that EPA wanted to see tweaked or changed. Wondering if when we get an underlined version, I mean, those particular changes are of high interest and high value to me, knowing, you know, what the EPA is like, you gotta change that. I'm like, okay, we should probably do that. So somehow knowing which are those particular changes would be helpful, and I don't know how we would do that in a red line version, but
Red.
yes.
Red.
I can highlight them.
Can we do that in red, so it's different color than our usual, so we
Yeah.
know
Yes.
that, yes.
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, and the changes in this presentation are EPA changes or carry on effects
Okay.
of what they asked us.
sorry, so all of these changes that you're suggesting here have originated from EPA?
From those conversations with, yeah.
Okay, so that's maybe, all right, well, that clarifies it then, if it's all EPA changes,
Then
Then that-
still better.
yeah.
For merging.
That's true.
Did I?
That's.
Well, I think we can still do the yellow highlights just to show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want-
Yes.
I need to correct.
Sorry.
And then we'll have a question. for
Just a point of clarification, there are a couple of sort of minor edits that were not from EPA.
Okay.
Just like there's that as in, because it was an in
Oh,
promptly, there are some other minor ones
Okay.
that really didn't come from EPA, but I would say the substantive ones, the bulk of those all came from.
okay,
So,
okay.
not wrong, but didn't want to be completely.
That's fair. Snre.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanna. I'm confused a little bit because I think that I heard Catherine say that whether we use waters or waters of the United States is basically a policy decision. So is the EPA okay with us using either or if they are?
So the EPA, the regulatory authority is to waters of the US, right? So that is what they're looking for to the extent there's a policy decision made to go broader than that.
Yeah.
That is okay, and that's part of the reason that initial definitional change to not explicit, that waters of the US is a subset of waters of the state was really important.
Okay,
The administration's preference in this is waters of the United States.
okay, but for the RAPs and other farm regulations, it's using waters of the state, okay.
Something that may be helpful for us when this does eventually get to the floor is to have some kind of a map that would be like, in this area, these would be waters of the state and these would be waters of the United States. You know what I mean? To show difference, that might be helpful. And in addition to that, I mean, I'm remembering from last year conversations that we had about HUCs. Do HUCs, which is
That's alleged.
which is the size of a waterway. So, and if I have this right, the higher the number, the smaller the stream.
Correct.
So is HUC size related, or is it a totally separate idea?
I think it's a separate idea.
Okay. Yes.
So I thought we were headed, well, a couple days ago, headed toward just using waters of the state as the definition because it's broader and encompasses. Why would we want to, it's also similar if we have one definition for everything. Why would we want to reduce this to waters of the United States? Does that mean shrinking the waters of the
So at the highest level, I would say it is because, that this is a federal Clean Water Act program. And so having that consistency of federal language throughout is why you might want to use waters of the United States as opposed to waters.
As a practical matter, what would happen if we use waters of the state?
I think because waters of the state is a broader definition, it could have the practical effect of some number of additional farms being identified as CAFOs as opposed to staying under the LFO, MFO programmatic grant.
Okay, any other questions at this point? Okay, thank you.
So we
This
will
is-
provide a red line strikeout or a modified version markup. That's 120 for these changes and a copy of the petition.
That's great.
And I understand that you're having further conversations with other advocacy groups to see where there may be overlap. Okay, that's fabulous. Thank you so much. Okay,
Thank you for your
any other questions? Okay, so with that, we are done for the day.